Are you searching for the best in online black radio? Then go to blacktalkradionetwork.com, helping you filter through the noise. Real talk, black talk.
The internet is full of half-truths and all-out lies. We've all seen them, and many people on social media complaining about it. Here's your chance to show and prove. WorldAfropedia.com is a black-owned and operated encyclopedia. There are several thousand articles, but we need help. We can't uncover all the truth ourselves. So please, join us and become a writer, editor, or blogger for WorldAfropedia.com today. Every little bit counts. We owe it to the future generations to put the truth out there. Visit WorldAfropedia.com, the African-centered encyclopedia, a global database of African knowledge for the purpose of bringing about global African wisdom and understanding. WorldAfropedia.com.
Every single thing when you turn on the TV tomorrow morning that they will talk about will all be related to racism, white supremacy as a system. Okay, Donald Trump. I say meet your next president. See, all kind of people from the time he started talking. Oh, he's crazy. Oh, he's this. Oh, he won't. Oh, the American people won't accept something. Donald Trump has pulled the hood off of, the sheet off of, the cover off of the system of racism, white supremacy. See, he pulled it off. And he's talking with more clarity than anybody else, who all the other candidates quietly are thinking about racism, but they're not talking overtly about it. But Donald Trump is talking. So like I said, Donald Trump's trump card is the race card in the system of racism, white supremacy. Now, the other thing that I want to say is for all of our organizations, NAACP, Urban League, National Action Network, all of the organizations, as long as they are not talking about racism, they're off the mark. They are off the mark. And there are reasons that they're not talking about racism. There are reasons that the president can't talk about racism. Because the people who tell him whether he can live or die have suggested the people who let people jump over the fence, let people in uninvited to state dinners, the people that control whether he's protected or not protected, has said that this topic is off limits. See, now, anytime there's something that people don't want you to talk about, you better look carefully at that topic. Now, fortunately, President Obama had an Attorney General, Eric Holder. And Attorney General Eric Holder said the most important thing that has been said in the Obama administration. Are we a nation of cowards being unable to talk about this? I called Reverend Sharpton's show one time. Hi, Dr. Welsing, how are you? Hi, Reverend Sharpton. I said, we need to talk about Racism. And he said, I don't know why people don't want to talk about racism, Dr. Welsing. See, talk about anything else. But see, as a physician, all the things that are happening to us as black people, all the things that are happening in these different areas of activity are the symptoms of the problem being caused by this activity here. So in other words, we will always be complaining. You see, whether we want to talk about police brutality under law or under war, see, we can complain and we can march. The police telling lies, the politicians in Chicago telling lies. See, all kind of lies. But if we don't say, well, what is causing all of this? Some people call it connecting the dots. See, not just looking at one dot and focusing on one dot. So something, that means that something is wrong with our conceptualization about the problem. See, like I have a sister who's in Chicago, very sick in the hospital. And the big question, what is wrong? In other words, she's having these symptoms. But the big question for the doctors to determine is, what is going on that is causing? See, not just the symptoms, but what is causing. And so this is where this question, why is this stuff happening? The New York Times editorial today. The Trump effect. See, this is what I'm doing with my money, buying newspapers like Dick Gregory. The Trump effect and how it spreads. It says we are on the brink, under Trump, on the brink of fascism. New York Times, all the news that's fit to print, editorial 12/10/2015. I say fascism is end-stage white supremacy. See, just like in Nazi Germany. Fascism, system of racism, white supremacy, determined to survive.
Context of White Supremacy. Gus T Renegade in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the system of white supremacy. Today's date, Thursday, May 19th, 2016. So I have been told. Always, I think, an opportunity to learn and an opportunity to gain further insight, listening to the words of Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. She has said many profound things. She's guest on this program 31 times over the years. Mm-hmm. All the interviews and different lectures and appearances that she did. College campuses, being on the Donahue Show, doing radio programs all the time, just being extremely generous with her time and energy, and all over the world. People in the UK noted that she had come over there to talk about this problem as white supremacy is a global issue. Out of all the things, out of all the insight that she shared over the many years, in my opinion, that sound clip that you heard, that was from her final lecture at the Cress Welsing Institute in Washington, D.C. That was from December of 2015. That was literally days before her transition when she said, Donald J. Trump, meet your next president. Now, this was before the primaries had started. This was when pretty much everybody was still saying exactly what she said. No way. This guy's crazy. I'm not, this is just, reality television. This will just be fun for a few giggles until he loses and bows out. 6 months later, wow. I think quite a few folks have come on this program and said, man, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing's understanding of racism, white supremacy was so far ahead that, it'll be decades, years, and people would just be grasping like, wow, she was able to make these type of predictions just based on her thorough understanding of white supremacy. As I have said consistently, we definitely want to make every effort to make sure that we keep her works, her teachings. I think first and foremost, that's what she would want us to take as many lessons as we can from what she tried to share with us over the years, and her spirit alive and well in the forefront of our thoughts as we work on solving this problem, and doing so with maximum Black self-respect. Thought it would be grand to have her sister with us once again to offer further thoughts, analyses, her own views, what we can and should be doing to solve these problems, and thoughts on her late sister, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, joining us for the third time this year. Once again, joining us from Washington, D.C., our guest, Miss Lorne Cress Love. Miss Love, are you with us?
I am with you, yes.
Thank you.
And, I was going to thank you for having me and for sharing that clip of Frances, her last lecture at the Cress Welsing Institute. As I was listening to her, I was just thinking about how profound a thinker she was, and I would have to say is. And you're absolutely right. I remember talking with her by phone because we talked a lot, and her saying, Donald Trump is going to win this. And if we are not careful, we will be in for a rude awakening when we wake up the morning after the November election and find that he has won. So thank you very much for inviting me and also for sharing that particular clip about Frances or by Frances, with your broad audience.
For sure. Thank you for sharing a bit of your Thursday evening. I know you have a lot of stuff that you are working on and been taking care of, so we just appreciate you being able to share some of your time to come back and speak with us again. Just with the whole Donald Trump thing, because I think that is hugely important, as did Dr. Welsing. I think she had been commenting about him and had been speaking pretty confidently for a few months. That wasn't the first time that she had said she thought he was going to win the presidency, and what that revealed about racism, white supremacy. I guess, number one, you said, you all had talked on the phone where she had shared these thoughts with you. Did you, like 6 months on, looking at it now, where it looks pretty serious, like he's going to, at minimum, he's going to be the Republican nominee. And the polls, at least last week, Reuters showed that he was tied with Hillary Clinton in the general election in terms of what they were projecting for the fall. And even, in my view, more importantly, the New York Times, they had an article that said that Donald Trump is probably polling lower than what he actually is, because there are a lot of white people that don't want to publicly admit that they're going to vote for Trump because they don't want people to think that they're racist. So they're just lying and saying that they're undecided. They're not sure who they're going to vote for, or they'll say maybe they're going to vote for Bernie Sanders or whatever, but they're actually going to vote for Trump. They just don't want to say that. When she was sharing this idea with you, this thought with you, what were your thoughts when you all were having these phone conversations?
Well, I can't honestly say specifically what I thought at any one time. Frances and I talked a lot, and basically we agreed on most issues. There are some times, and I can't give you specifics right this moment, of issues where we varied, but we we're sisters, and we're a very short. We're very close in age. My birthday, I think I said this on your program before, she was 81 on the 18th of March, and I was 82 on the 31st of March. So between the 18th of March and the 31st, we're actually the same age. And so we grew up together. Our younger sister that she referenced in her talk, and as she was saying, she was very ill, also has had her transition on the 20th of February. So, between the 2nd of January and the 20th of February, I have lost both my sisters. It's like 2/3 of my life has just kind of suddenly disappeared. But so we talked a lot. I mean, about issues, mostly issues of race, mostly issues of how are we going to get ourselves out of this dilemma. And so I did not disagree with her when she said Donald Trump was going to win. I may have been somewhat surprised. I may have said, well, I don't know. But Frances had a kind of clairvoyance around a lot of issues. I mean, there was something in her genetic makeup that allowed her to see and to project into the future and to see things that many of us did not immediately see. That was a part of her genius, and I would have to say is a part of her genius, because as we listen to her in that particular tape and others, what she was saying in the past is still relevant and true now. And one of the things that I would really like to suggest that people consider is to get the ISIS papers, take your ISIS papers off the bookshelf and choose a particular chapter, because each chapter in the ISIS papers was based on various lectures, and reread and reread and reread and internalize the information, and then decide how you can utilize that information in your community or in your life. That is what keeping her memory alive necessitates. It now necessitates a doingness. I have been reading today, actually, her chapter on black children and the process of inferiorization. And I went to it because a friend of mine called me. I don't know, perhaps you may or may not know about a terrible killing in Chicago where a very young teenager killed another teenager, and it was the mother gave the child the knife to stab this other girl. And I mean, it's horrible, absolutely horrible. But Frances's chapter on the inferiorization of black children speaks specifically to this issue. Our children are our future, and we are neglecting them. We are losing them. They are killing each other, but they are us, and they are a reflection of us. And so whatever we see our children doing speaks substantively to where our minds are. And so if we are not able to help these children, then what is going to happen to our race? I raised the question.
Wow. Extremely important insight that I know Dr. Welsing, she talked on this program a lot about black children and the importance for having when you talk about black self-respect, having the utmost regard for the creation of black life, and saying consistently, when you play around with sex, the joke is on the offspring, and these type of things happen when you do not have the highest black self-respect for yourself and any children that you help bring into this world, that these sort of things, this is what you can predict is going to happen in the system of white supremacy. I guess even within the response right there, just talking about current issues that are happening in your native Chicago and the importance of us being active, us doing, using Dr. Welsing's work and anybody else that, might have done something, written something, or have done works that will help us solve this problem. How have you been able to sustain yourself having to deal with so much? You said just kind of losing so much in such a short period of time this year. What have you done to just kind of nourish your spirit and to be able to maintain so that you can continue to be active?
I don't know. And that's really true. I don't really know how I am managing to would I say hold on? People say, well, how are you doing? And I say I'm hanging in. But I do know that that there are certain symptoms that I'm experiencing that reflect grief. I would have to say that I do know that, and I think about myself, but I think of all the hundreds of thousands, if you would, of people, mothers, who have lost their children, and what it is that they're experiencing, maybe not even realizing the depth of grief, although I'm sure that many of them do. But, we are asked to put stuff aside or to get over it. And I have been trying to think about what kind of group therapy can communities begin to participate in to help grieving mothers, grieving siblings, grieving communities deal with the loss of young people. Sometimes we don't always realize that when any child dies, a bit of us dies, and especially with these, children so young losing their lives in such as what appears to be senseless ways. It actually is not senseless, because what it has to do with that, in my opinion, has to do with lack of love of self, lack of self-respect. And that can be related to miseducation, if you would. Our children should be learning about themselves and about their history and about who they are from the moment they step into a school, whether it's a Head Start, kindergarten, pre-K, nursery school. That's where African-centered education needs to be in all of our schools and wherever our children are. And if we cannot do it in our schools, then we must do it in our churches or our community centers. Because if you do not know who you are, then how will you know where to go? How will you know what to do? And this, little short month of February, when we kind of raise up some names, is inadequate for people, young people, all of us, to develop a strong sense of self, a strong love of self, a strong belief in self, so that we can step forward with power. And I think that this is a serious lack of understanding of the need for African-centeredness, African-centered education, African history being taught at an early age. It almost needs to be taught in the womb, if possible, because even that fetus is hearing and recording. From the moment of conception, everything is there. So that we really need to regroup. We need to be very serious. We need to get very quiet and address some of the most serious issues that have impacted us since we've been off of these boats, I do believe.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Context of White Supremacy. Our guest, Ms. Lorne Cress Love. As you were talking about in terms of us not having adequate self-love, self-respect, black self-respect, and then not addressing the centuries of trauma that we've experienced as a result of white supremacy, white terrorism from the enslavement period on up, right up through today. I was thinking that we're almost at the 1-year anniversary of the Charleston massacre. It's coming up next month in June. And we had Dr. Welsing. She was on our program within 24 hours of that incident, and she was talking about what had happened, and again, being prophetic, what was going to happen, and people talking about reconciliation and everything that took place over the next week, months, or what have you. As I said, the 1-year anniversary is coming up. Just before we went live today, I started seeing different books and programs are coming out talking about, the 1-year anniversary of Charleston and what's happened over that year and what we can do to move forward. And one of the titles that I saw, it was Reimagining Forgiveness. And this was about the Charleston massacre. Dr. Welsing, she spoke in depth about, her views on talking about forgiveness in association with white supremacy and specifically with that Charleston incident and how this relates to just a part of the way that we have been conditioned and victimized into forgiving people who continually oppress and abuse us. What are your thoughts with the 1-year anniversary of Charleston and people talking about we need to practice forgiveness?
Well, there used to be a sweatshirt that said, "Never forget, never forgive." And I think that, although I do understand the concept of forgiveness, I think that foremost is not forgetting what has happened, and to also understand, as Neely Fuller says, if you do not understand racism, white supremacy, what it is and how it works, everything else you think you know will only confuse you. And although I think that within the Christian tradition we're asked to forgive, we cannot forget. We cannot not understand what that horrible killing was. I think that forgiveness may have something to do with the individual as opposed to forgiving someone outside of yourself. You may have to. I'm not even certain about that. I'm just not certain. And I don't want to speak definitively about that, because I had not really given a lot of thought to the fact of, or the congregation wanting to forgive. That's certainly a part of the Lord's Prayer, forgive your trespassers, etc., etc. But I think that never forget and never forgive is a standard by which I would intend myself to operate right in through here.
I'm reminded, I know Dr. Welsing, she spoke about this before the Charleston incident last year, and then she repeated it again after, because there was so much talk about forgiving Dylan Storm Ruth, the white terrorist in that situation. But she said, as a general and child psychiatrist in her practice, working predominantly with black patients, she said that forgiveness is not a part of her therapy, her counseling at all. She said that she works with people in terms of being able to heal and to not be caught in a cycle where they're angry, where they can move forward and heal if they have been violated and abused by somebody, but that forgiving that individual for what they did, that is not a part of the process at all. For her, she said, if you get to a point where you would like to forgive that person and make amends and move forward, that's fine, but that is not a part of how she does treatment at all. And she related that to racism, white supremacy, and how we get encouraged to just be in this cycle of constantly forgiving all of the trespasses that whites, racists have committed against black people worldwide. I thought that was one of the more profound moments out of many that she shared on the program, that was not a part of her practice at all, forgiveness. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, as I said, the T-shirt, the sweatshirt that just comes to my mind, it has the image of the, that famous image of the Middle Passage, and the ship with the bodies, lined up in the hall, and it says, "Never forget and never forgive." And I don't think that we are just in a place at this point where we should be forgiving these enemies. We need to be constantly alert, constantly vigil, constantly searching and looking and trying to understand the answers that will heal us. But I'm not sure that just forgiving is one of the healing ingredients or healing bombs. I think that loving ourselves is probably the main ingredient in this struggle for self-respect. Learning to love ourselves is the most important thing, I believe, at this point. I think that much of the horrors that we are inflicting on each other are a result of not loving ourselves. And so that is where I would rather spend my energy, my time, my thoughts. How do we begin to do this substantively so that we heal ourselves? And that is really serious work. I mean, I think that we have not really totally addressed the ultimate harm that has infected us for the last 500 years. I don't think that we really totally understand that there's never been one moment stop in time since the first African was put on a slave ship or kidnapped and marched to the coast and then put on a slave ship. And I'm not sure that we have really totally understood that we are carrying all of that pain, all of that degradation. What has stopped it? There's not been a moment stop in time, so that all that pain, all of that upset, all of that anger, all of that insanity, really, is in the DNA. And so this is where we need to be focusing our attention, developing some theories on how do we get out from under that? How do we expunge that pain that is just below the surface? It's not, we may not recognize that it's there, but it's just below the surface. And so Dr. Welsing has brilliantly identified the situation and told us where we are, told us about this system of racism, white supremacy, what it is and how it works, and how it has worked on us, how it has affected us. Now, how are we going to, let's say, disinfect ourselves? That is the work that meets us at this point, I do believe.
Wow. As you gave that response, we had a program yesterday, and one of our investors, she called in and she said she's been listening. She's heard Dr. Welsing, and she's heard you on the broadcast before. She's heard Mr. Fuller and a lot of other work that we've done. And she said that in trying to apply these concepts and what she's learned, she said that the next steps that she wants to take is to wear her hair natural, get away from using the chemicals and what have you in her hair. But she says she's having difficulty making that transition. And I told her, I said, you should listen to the program tomorrow. We're going to have Lorne Cress Love on. When she was on with us the first time, she talked in detail, really powerful example. She said, I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, you said it took you 7 years to transition to natural hair. And you talked about the influence that Margaret Burroughs in Chicago, that she had on you, having natural hair. And, do I have the courage to do what this black female is doing, to have natural, and even putting it in context that this is not 2016. You can just go online and, easy, find all the products that you need and some YouTube videos to make it real easy, and all these examples that you just did not have access to all of those types of resources and other models of other black females who also had natural hair that just didn't exist 50 years ago. So I said, I will be sure to ask, what suggestions, because I think that's a big part of what you just talked about in terms of is so many layers of that degradation and just messaging that your hair is wrong. Dr. Welsing talked about that all the time. Your skin is wrong, your hair is wrong, everything about you that signifies black is wrong and should be obliterated and changed. What kind of tips would you recommend for her?
Well, I would number one, if the sister is listening, I would commend her for where she is now at the point of wanting to take this step, because that is the first step, is deciding that you want to do this. Then now these days, so much more than what was available for me back in 1957 when I first started thinking about this idea of hair. There's a plethora of information out here that is available, and I would just suggest to this marvelous woman that go, if there's a black bookstore in anywhere near you, or to go to the library and just start looking at books. I guess the first book that might be valuable would be The Miseducation of the Negro by Carter G. Woodson, because I think that, that's kind of like book one almost, that helps us to begin to understand how we have been miseducated historically, how we have been forced into reading the slave masters' ideas and concepts about who we are. So I think that Carter G. Woodson is a good place to start, but almost any place is a place to start. ISIS Papers is a good place to start. It's a matter of beginning to imbue oneself, embrace oneself as a person of color. And actually, I don't remember if the last time I talked, but this book that I use, called Love Yourself and Let the Other Person Have It Your Way, by a man named Lawrence Crane, $12.95 on Amazon, has been very helpful to me, and as I have shared it with others, because this book was not written specifically for black people. He probably didn't even know black people would be reading it. But it is a very easy to read and understand technology that one can apply to oneself in the many areas of one's activity. What Lawrence Crane says is that, and he was a mentee of a man named Lev Levinson, who developed something called the release technique that Lev Levinson used to save his life. And what he says in that book is that we are constantly beating up on ourselves and constantly disapproving of ourselves. And so he serves as the therapist and asks you, can you let go of disapproving of yourself? And it's a technique that he teaches you to use. You then become your own therapist, and you can use this technique and this process for the many areas of your life in which you want to improve. And you can actually use it. I'm talking to the sister and anyone else who is thinking about, right, specifically at this moment, can you let go of disapproving of your hair? And you answer yes. And can you let go some more of disapproving of your hair? And you keep going through that process, and then you go to, can you give yourself some approval, or your hair approval, or your nappy hair, or your natural hair approval? And so you get to letting go of those things that are stopping you from not wanting natural hair. Because we've just been programmed. We've been programmed about our skin color. We've been programmed about our hair. We've been programmed about our facial features, not understanding that if the creator of the universe wanted us to have straightened hair, he would have given us straight hair. And actually, straight hair does not go well with the vast number of our features. Straight hair does not go well with our features. If you really think about it, we have the perfect features for the marvelous, wonderful, gorgeous hair that the Creator gave us. And, it's kind of difficult because I do understand that as a woman, and as we look at the television and we're bombarded with other images that have nothing to do with us, but we're told that these are the beautiful people, these are the marvelous people, these are the wonderful people. And yet, the Creator gave us marvelous skin, marvelous hair. And that book is $12.95 from Amazon. I ought to be getting some kind of commission because I keep telling people to get that book because it's a very simple methodology that one can employ to begin to handle those aspects of our livingness that we are not happy with. And actually, you can use it to rid yourself of pain, to heal yourself. It's a very interesting technology. We are at the point now, I think, in our journey that we do have to begin to find and use technology to begin this next level of our process of healing and growing into power, because we must empower ourselves. And it's not easy in this society for African Americans to empower themselves. So, but if we don't, then we're going to end up in the Bantu stands of the suburbs with no political power, no way to return. And I think we're seeing that in many of our major cities as we, quote, these cities gentrify. So I hope that's helpful, or in some way, to not just that sister, but others. You know, our hair is marvelous, and Dr. Welsing talked about, you know, the strength in the coils of our hair and the antenna, and I think that's why they shave Samson's hair, cut his hair, because of the strength in his hair and the coils, the antenna, if you would. Mm-hmm.
If she's listening in, feel free, dial in if you'd like to ask a question or get a bit more insight from Miss Lorne Cress Love on that subject matter. Definitely appreciate that. I wanted to ask this as well. Mr. Fuller, he was talking about Dr. Welsing, and he said that it's just addressing, honestly, racism, white supremacy is stressful. And he said, you know, Dr. Welsing was intensely interested in dealing with, dissecting, analyzing, thinking about white supremacy, racism as often as she could, and spent so many decades doing just that in and of itself is stressful and can take a toll on you. Did Dr. Welsing, and I mean, she was working with black people as a mental health professional, working with black people who were coming and having their problems and stress and what have you, and investing her time and energy to try to help replenish, restore their well-being, their sense of health. Did she ever, you know, give you the sense that, man, she was weary, she was just tired or worn down doing this work? And did she give any insight in terms of how she was able to carry on so long doing this great work?
I don't think she talked about it very much. No. I mean, she really didn't talk about, you know, being really tired, but I do know that she was obviously having some physical difficulties. But it's interesting because we come from a family of physicians. You know, my father was a physician, and our grandfather was a physician. And I think that, you know, somehow we weren't supposed to be sick. I mean, somewhere in the background of that, I think, you know, was something about you weren't supposed to be sick, you know, or I'm not certain that we were really trained to go to the doctor because the doctor was in the house, you know, so you didn't really learn to go, and I see that in myself, you didn't really learn to go to the doctor immediately because the doctor was there. And I don't know whether that carried on with Francis or not. But certainly I'm not certain that we totally understand what it means to constantly be taking in the ills of other people. You know, that work is much heavier than I think people realize. And I think that Frances did not spend any time at all without thinking about issues of race. And, I mean, this was a constant with her, constantly thinking, constantly reviewing, constantly analyzing. I mean, this is what she did, whether she was with a patient or not, when she was reading the newspaper, when she was talking to individuals, you know. Like, she was constantly calling the White House. I don't know if she talked about that on your program, but she was, every day almost, she was, you know, that I talked to her, girl, you should call the president, you know, on blah, 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 whatever this subject was, or, you know, call the White House. So that she was constantly carrying, I would say, the race. Our grandfather, who was an early physician in Chicago, and maybe I talked about this the last time I was on the air, but he died in 1909, and he was called a race man. He did not call himself that, but that was what he was called by other black people, because he spent much of his time fighting for the race. And Frances, I do believe, was channeling, you know, our grandfather. I really believe that. That she spent her life fighting for the race. And, well, that's almost all that I can say about that, because that's what she did. That somehow she saw that as her mission. And these missions take a toll. This is not an easy mission, to fight and to struggle for the race, and to want to help our people. This is, you know, it's not just a matter of saying some words, because the words have energy. Thoughts are energy. And, you know, in the beginning, John says in John 1, in the beginning was the Word, and then the Word was made flesh. So in the beginning are our ideas, and our ideas materialize. But that process of materialization is a process of energy. There's kinetic energy connected to that. And I'm not certain that even Frances, understood the toll that this work was taking on her. You know, I'm just not certain, because this is, as you well know yourself, putting together a radio program regularly on issues of race. This is emotional work. This is not just, you know, pity-pat. No, this is hard work. It takes a toll emotionally, whether we recognize it or not, and our emotions affect our bodies. So she was a race woman, and she spent much time fighting for the race. Mm-hmm. I would say she gave her life fighting for the race. Mm-hmm.
Ashe, I would definitely second that. And an important point just for other folks out who invest a lot of time and energy dealing with this problem of racism, white supremacy, extremely important, looking out taking care of yourself, because it does exact a toll. There is a price dealing with this as a black person. I do see folks dialed in. I wanted to get some of their questions, but also wanted to make sure that I asked. You mentioned this when we were speaking on the phone. I don't think I included it during the last time that you visited the program, but I thought it was a really important concept. You said that racists, they have done a really good job making us think that we are someplace that we are not. Just if you can explain what you meant with that concept, because I know on this program we talk a lot about confusion, and that seems to really get to the heart of it. Do you recall that concept?
No.
Oh, man. I'll see if,
what did I say? Refresh my memory a little bit more.
Okay. We were talking, and I think I had mentioned how Dr. Welsing, she used to always talk about how us not understanding that we are in a system of racism, white supremacy. That's how you can end up with a Donald Trump winning the presidency. That's how you can end up with something like the Charleston massacre. That's how something like that can happen, where we think we're in a democracy. We're all just, getting along, and everybody is doing great, and we're all looking for equality and make sure everybody's good. That's not where we are at all. We are in a system of white supremacy, and us just not having that understanding, us being confused about where we are, what's operating on the planet, that produces a lot of our confusion and really produces a lot of the, poor choices that we make in not understanding, not having an accurate grasp of where we are. Does that jog your memory at all?
Well, we go to these people's schools. I don't recall ever in my educational career really being informed by professors who were white that this was a racist society. That was never a part of the curriculum that I recall. Carnegie Woodson's book, The Miseducation of the Negro, totally speaks to the fact that we have been educated in these people's system, and we have been totally miseducated. And it's hard to understand that you are miseducated, and the further you go up the ladder for these various degrees, the more miseducated you are. And then it becomes difficult to confront that. Because we are told that, well, now you have a master's degree, and this means blah, blah, blah. And now you have a PhD, and this means blah, blah, blah. And in fact, the more educated you are, the more difficult it becomes to help your people. Because there's nothing in the curriculum designed to help black people. Why would it be in a racist society? Why would that happen? Why would there be curricula to, bring down the master's house? Because you cannot bring down the master's house with the master's tools. So we find ourselves in a dilemma. There was a brother who was I am, along with several other people, a founder of a school in Chicago. It's a public school, and it was specifically designed to have an African-centered curriculum. But that becomes very difficult because then you don't have teachers who have gone through colleges and universities who are then able to deliver African-centered curriculum, They're not very many. There certainly are some, but they're not very many. Anyway, but in our school, we have found it really difficult to get enough teaching staff, a strong enough teaching staff, so that there then becomes a total part of the curriculum, permeating the entire curriculum, especially in a public school system. So it becomes, how would I say it? It becomes totally a struggle, let's say, to implement programs that would help us to really understand who we are and where we are, broadly. But it becomes even more necessary that we up our game. I mean, there should be a number of institutes, not just for Frances Cress Welsing, but I mean, the Cress Welsing Institute was a volunteer institute that she developed. Actually, it was more than 30 years, but let's say 30 years. People didn't pay. She put up her own money, and people came the second Thursday of every month from September to June to listen to her. Now, I'm not saying that everybody has to listen to her, but there are other scholars out here and other people in every community almost in this country who could be doing something, who could be helping to educate us or re-educate us, to remove this miseducation so that we can free ourselves and save ourselves. It is imperative. We're being forced out of urban centers all over the country, and I don't hear a hue and cry. I mean, do we understand what this means? This is a deliberate act, a deliberate program that's being employed in every major city in the United States to get African American people out of the urban centers and to push us out to Bantustans. It's the Bantustan plan that was employed in South Africa. And I don't hear anybody screaming, no. I mean, even me. I don't know whether I'm going out too far at this moment, but I would share this with one of the things that happens when you get in your 80s is that if you can maintain your memory, or at least bits of it enough to recall. My family, black people, have been removed from wherever ever since we were removed from Africa. And we may not really even see it. But I want to share an example that maybe I did it before, I don't know. But my grandfather, my mother's father, came to Chicago in 1893 for the Columbia Exposition. He was born in Canada. And actually, his father came down to Chicago in 1863 and joined the Union Army because there was a Union Army base in Chicago. And so my great-grandfather came down and joined the Union Army in Chicago and fought in the Civil War. Then he went back to Canada, and his oldest son, who was my grandfather, my mother's father, came to Chicago in 1893 and to make a better life for himself, which is what immigrants do. Well, he he had a grocery store on the street. I want to do this kind of fast, but he had a grocery store on the street in an area where the University of Chicago now exists, an area called Hyde Park. And in around 1909, that area incorporated and as a township and put in what is called a restricted covenant. And a restricted covenant is a designation and an agreement that black people cannot live in this area. And if you own a building or a home, you will not sell or rent your home to black people. And that was in 1909. And so my grandfather and other blacks who were living in that area were forced out. So he bought a house in another part of Chicago in 1909 and raised his family there. And then when my parents, my mother and dad got married, they lived in that house, and my grandparents moved in another house. Well, in the 40s, our family, or late 40s to early 50s, our family was forced out of that area because a housing development sponsored by New York Life Insurance Company came and built high-rise housings. So we were forced out of that area. And now into the area that my family bought a house in 1953. And now that area, which is a block from the University of Chicago, is being gentrified. Now, I'm still there, but the African Americans, I live in three townhouses. I'm in the middle one, and we were all black, and now I'm the only African American still there. So I have had the experience of all my life, my parents' life, and my grandparents' life, being forced out of areas where white folks decide we don't want you there anymore. And so and it's called different things. It wasn't called gentrification back in the 40s and into the 50s when we were forced to move. It was like urban renewal, but we called it Negro removal. And so we need to really understand what's going on. This is just racism, white supremacy, what it is and how it works. And as Neely says, if you don't understand what it is, everything else you think you know will only confuse you. So gentrification is black removal. That's what it is. And this is what's happening to us all over the country. And I don't hear the hue and cry that needs to go up, because ultimately this is almost like the final removal. When we're out in the suburbs and we can't get back in, and we don't have every teenager doesn't have his own car, and there are no jobs and no place to go, and we lose political power that we have fought for so long to gain, what are we going to do? What is going to happen to us? This is very serious. We're in real danger.
Absolutely. I'm reminded that audio clip at the beginning from Dr. Welsing's final lecture at the Cress Welsing Institute, where she said she was talking about Trump possibly becoming the president and what all this means. She said she felt it was in-stage white supremacy. She had talked repeatedly about us being on a genocide slide, and exactly what you just laid out, removing the 21st century Negro removal programs, not just in Chicago, but even her dealing with this on a personal level in Washington, D.C., and everything that she was going through with her housing situation.
With her house, exactly. And, I used to live in D.C., and I moved back to Chicago a little bit over 20 years ago to care for our mother who was developing Alzheimer's. But at the time that when I lived in D.C. before, I saw the beginnings of what is called gentrification. And I don't know if people know D.C., but I'm going to tell you that this is the new D.C. that I have come back to. This is not the chocolate city anymore. This is another D.C. And I understand they're bringing about 1,000 folk into D.C. per month. It may be more than that. I don't know where they're getting these people from, but these are not African American people. This city is being deliberately demographically altered. Deliberately. As are other cities in this country.
Mm-hmm. I've seen a lot. There have been a lot of different reports in the Washington Post talking about that explicitly. And even as you were talking about what happened in Chicago to the generations with your family, and as I said, what happened to Dr. Welsing on a personal level, and she had been talking about that for a while as well. Indy B. Connolly, he's a black scholar. He's been a guest on this program before. He wrote the book, A World More Concrete, where he talked about the history of white people stealing through a variety of different ways, black property. He focused on Florida, but he talked about this is a national problem. He said that white people, racists, they have gotten increasingly efficient at confiscating black property over the years. And he started with something like Tulsa and saying that Black Wall Street, that people don't think about it, but that was land confiscation because they went in and took property and then destroyed the records that this property was owned by black people at one point. So that was a huge part of it that gets conveniently omitted when people talk about the whole terroristic act of that. But he said you move from that, white people coming in and killing and raping and bludgeoning and all of this, to we'll just do it with property taxes. Now you don't have any sort of invasion and all this, ruckus and everything. We'll just raise your property taxes so that now you cannot afford to stay in the area. Or we'll raise the property value so the rents go up so you can't afford to be there. We'll destroy the school systems in that area. So if you have children, the quality of schools go down. So you'll just move on. A variety of different ways that we can totally change and get black people out of here. And as he said, they have gotten, it seems, increasingly efficient at pulling this off. Worldwide, I would say.
Well, we need to understand, look at the Native Americans. How was this country acquired in the first place? We don't really know the real history of the millions and millions of people who were called Indians, the nations of people who were here before the white man came, and how he confiscated, killed, murdered, bludgeoned, and took the land. So it's not something new, we just don't know the history,
Absolutely. We had a few folks that dialed in with questions. Let's see here. The person that called in from a blocked number, did you have a question for our guest, Miss Lorne Cress Love? You should be with us.
Good evening. Can I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, good evening. Good evening, Miss Cress Love.
Hi.
Hi. First, let me express my sincere condolences to you for the loss of both of your sisters. And I just wanted to ask a question, but before I did that, I just wanted to share briefly how Dr. Welsing personally touched my life. I was at her lectures in December of 2013, 14, and 15. After reading her book twice and hearing about her and listening to her on this program, In 2013, my father passed away. I live in New York City, and the nature of his death was horrific, and it caused a big rift in my family, and I was like alienated, and I had a lot of trouble functioning, and I realized that I needed some assistance. But knowing the system, I was determined to not want to speak to a white person. So I called your sister, and I told her what my situation was, and she was very kind enough to me to suggest where I could start to find help from a black person in New York City. And subsequently I did, and that made me want to travel to D.C. to her institute to meet her and listen for 3 years straight. And I did that in December of every year personally because it was like a new start for me for the new year. It was almost like a new gift for myself. And I learned a great deal from her. And I listened to Miss Sabrina on the COWS a couple of months ago. I think it was back in March. And she said that how Dr. Welsing said the same things over and over at her lecture. And even though she did say the same thing, and she had been saying the same things for years, very consistent, every time I went, I took away something new that I didn't realize and that I thought I knew, that I didn't realize, and I got a greater understanding of what she was speaking of. But my question to you is regarding the Institute. Is it still going to function this September coming until June of 2017? And if so, in what capacity will it function? And that's all I had. I'll mute my line. Thank you for taking my call, Gus.
Well, first of all, thank you for your kind condolences, and and thank you for sharing how Dr. Welsing, was able to help you. The future of the Institute has yet to be determined. It just has yet to be determined in what form it's going to take. We have between now, June, and July, August to kind of look at what or how we can preserve her work, how we can make what is available more meaningful to people, how we can keep it going. But we have not totally made that determination. So it's just difficult for me to say. Howard University, Frances had to, it was a kind of sometimes on like pins and needles whether she was even going to be able to use the Blackburn Center most recently. So we'll have to just, I almost can't even talk about it because I don't know what to say about it at this point. I just can't say. I do want to find a mechanism and a way to continue her sharing her work, the work that's left, the tapes, the lectures, with broadly, because I think that we must do that. As you said, it is not enough to just hear someone one time. You have to listen over and over and over and over again, and to imbue yourself with these ideas. And that's not just for Frances, that's for anyone. That's how we make change. Change just does not come overnight. It takes work. It takes understanding. It takes study, however we do that. That's one of the reasons that I suggest that people get their ISIS papers and read, take a chapter and study it. Not just read, but study it. I'm looking at her and reviewing her chapter on black children and the process of interiorization. That is so important in terms of what is happening and has happened to our children. And if we are teachers or counselors or anyone working with these schools, we need to read that book, that section on the interiorization of black children. And we need to take some stands. We need to step up to the plate because we are losing these children, and the children are our future. So I cannot emphasize that enough. It is, we need to read the book. We need to read the book and study the book and find an area in which you can become proficient and then take that knowledge to the community in one way or another. We have to do that. Am I going on too much? Am I, am I?
No, ma'am, you're not.
Okay. I just don't know yet, huh?
Yes, no, I understand. With regard to all of the information that she left us, it would be wonderful if we could have some sort of curriculum. And this is just an idea that I had in my head, If we had some kind of curriculum where we can begin to share this information with each other in our homes. A lot of us don't even know how to start a workshop. But if we could share this information with each other in our homes, just as Dr. Welsing and Sabrina did in Dr. Welsing's home, that would be absolutely wonderful.
Well, all it takes, that's not hard to do. All it takes is getting some of the CDs and inviting some friends over. That's all it takes. I mean, it is. We may think that stuff is hard, but it really isn't. I mean, you can start with one or two friends or one or two people who are of like mind, and just sit down and listen. Have some coffee, have some refreshment, but don't have too much food, because once we get into eating a lot of food, then, we do more food than we do, study. But it can be done. I'm a part in Chicago of a group called Black Book Review, and I've been back in Chicago for over 20 years, and I've been a part of that Black Book Review for that amount of time. And what we do is we meet only once a month, and we read black books. It's on various subjects, and it has been. I was amazed at how it has improved my knowledge just by taking a book and sharing it. And we have coffee and donuts or whatever. On a Saturday morning, we meet from 10 to maybe about 1, once a month. But just reading books on issues affecting black people, it works well. So people can do that. There are a lot of things that we can do that we don't think we can do, I mean, it doesn't take any more than one or two other people, or just start with ourselves. And but I agree that we do need a curriculum, and that is something that some people, I'm not sure who they are looking into, but we have talked about the possibility of curriculum development for the ISIS papers and the Cress theory. That is really something that I have, just thrown out there as a possibility. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doris. Thank you, sweetheart, for your call.
Mm-hmm. Thomas in New York, did you have a question for Miss Lorne Cress Love? You should be with us.
Absolutely. Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Good evening, Gus. Good evening, Mrs. Love. I just wanted to once again offer my condolences for Dr. Welsing and your other sister as well.
Thank you.
I just had a quick question. Well, really, two. I asked the guest last night. She was a Chicago resident. If you've seen an influx in pharmacies in the area in Chicago, and you said your area is being gentrified, which is very similar to Harlem, where I live. And in a 25-block radius, we have 19 pharmacies. Between two avenues, 25 blocks, it's 19 pharmacies, and I just wanted to know if you saw an influx in Chicago.
Are these marijuana pharmacies?
No, these are like little regular medicine pharmacies. They all have different prices for the medications. All seem to be mostly Indians and Arabs who are the pharmacists and their family businesses.
God! No, I have not been aware of that. No, I'm not aware of that. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist, but I would say that I'm just not aware of that influx at this point. Yeah,
okay,
no.
Yeah, because I walked down one day and to my kid's school, and I counted them on 7th Avenue, which is Adam Clayton Powell Boulevard, and then I walked up to 8th Avenue to walk back, which is Frederick Douglass Boulevard, and I counted 19 between 150th and 125th Street, and I just thought that was amazing. My question for you is, with this new influx of gentrification, where do you see black people going? And that's my only question. Thank you for coming on the show.
Wait a minute, hold on a minute. What? Say that question again. With the influx?
Sure. With the influx of gentrification, this new wave of gentrification coming through the black areas, it's hitting New York hard. You said it's going through Chicago, countless cities. I just wanted to know, where do you see black people going once they leave the urban centers?
Well, some city planners might just wish they would go to hell, but people are being forced out to suburbs. Out of the city. Other things, people who have Section 8 certificates are now allowed to move almost any place in the country. You can take your Section 8 certificate award from New York and go wherever, almost. People are being encouraged to leave the cities. Rentals are increasing so that you will not be able to live in urban settings. Unless you have an income that provides for that, and the rentals are increasing. Many things are happening. Public housing is being diminished. In Chicago, at one time, we had approximately 26 straight blocks of public housing. that has all been torn down. And people had lived in that housing for years and generations. And all of that is gone. So where are those people? I don't know where they all are. But they're being forced out of Chicago, as they're being forced out of other cities. And, well, you know, that started with the assassination of Dr. King and the so-called riots. Does that answer your question?
Definitely. You know, it's funny. I was in Chicago in '95, and they were knocking down the Robert trailer homes. There was a lot of talk about it then. And now, from what I understand, they're gone. And I see that Chicago still has a steady rate of murders and shootings. And where I'm from in Jersey City, they did the same thing to the project. They knocked them down, and everyone kind of dispersed within the city, and they still have a very high rate of murders and shootings there. It's actually worse now than it was when it was bad, you know. So I just think that the people from the projects were dispersed into other parts of the cities, and it's led to a lot of wars and things being shifted. You know, as gangs move to one area to another, it cause new rivals and new gangs and new fights. And that's what I think happened with the project people. But thank you for answering my question.
Mm-hmm. Right. But also, I think that we need to raise some questions about all these killings and stuff. I personally believe that people are being programmed some kind of way. I mean, you know, we're almost taking this killing and stuff for granted, but no. I think people are being somehow programmed. Now, I don't know how that's going on exactly, but I do believe that it is unnatural. We're being made to believe that it's just natural. It is not natural. Something is happening. There's a reason. There's a reason for these young people killing each other. There's a reason behind everything. And, you know, we can say, well, it's just the gangs, but something else is going on. There are some hands, hidden hands, someplace. And we need to be asking these questions. And we're not asking the questions. You know, what is going on? Why? Why? I mean, it's almost gotten to the place where it's acceptable. We're not distressed. Oh, well, yeah, so-and-so got killed last night. And yeah, well, okay. It's almost like we're so kind of numbed by the killings that we cannot, or in apathy. We're in apathy. There's something else going on. There's some other hands in this. They're hidden hands. We don't know where these hands are. They're hidden hands, believe me.
The person that dialed in, last four digits, 5992. 5992. Did you have a question for Miss Cress Love? You should be with us.
Yes. May I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Good evening, Miss Cress Love. And
Hi.
It's a pleasure to hear you. This is the first time I've heard you talk on the show, so it's a real pleasure. I don't have a question. I just have one regret, and I don't have too many, so I never met Dr. Frances Cress Love, but I admire her work. I do have her book, Keys to the Colors, and earlier this year, I live in the Philadelphia area, and there's a professor who owns his own institute for Black Studies for the community, and we read this book, chapter by chapter. It took a couple of months, whatever, but it was our reading assignment. We went through the book chapter by chapter in there. So I just want to express she was a brilliant woman. As a former mental health worker myself, I truly understand when she was talking about the racism in psychiatry. And again, my one regret would be that I just never met her, and so that's all I want to say.
Oh, well, thank you so much for your call. And it's really good to know about the class that you took, and how you all studied, the ISIS papers. Yeah, that was really profound.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
The retired firefighter in Florida. Did you have a question for Ms. Cress Love? You should be with us.
Greetings, can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Hi.
Yes. Well, more so than a question, I just wanted to tell Mrs. Love of our undue appreciation of you being around, so that we can learn from you and share with you and just hear you and your experiences. One thing that I have come to understand is very valuable is with this quest that we all have to work towards bringing an end to the system of racism, white supremacy. A lot of times we feel by ourselves, but we can see that Dr. Welsing had a very, very significant support group, meaning yourself and your other sister. I know it really was an impact, a helpful impact for her to have you around and your other sister around. And I personally know how valuable that is also, because I have some siblings that I can go to and speak with. And even regardless of Dr. Welsing, you as yourself has been very valuable to non-white black people in the world, actually, as far as to go about the means of solving the problem of racism and white supremacy. And I just wanted to say thank you, for what you have done and what you are presently doing. You are very valuable to us. And I just wanted to on behalf of the program itself and black people in general, especially myself, to just thank you for everything that you've done and what you're doing. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Mm-hmm.
Right on.
Those are some kind words and some, I kind of need at this point support. So I appreciate that very much. I do. I really do. Mm-hmm.
I even recall Dr. Welsing also giving some of the family background, and I remember it because it's so important when she was saying that your parents raised you all to obtain these things that some of us call education, skills or whatever, to come back into the era where non-white black people are at, to be able to share that understanding, share that what you learned, in college or wherever, and we really appreciate that, because that's something that actually that it definitely still needs to continue on to what your parents raised y'all to do. It's something that really needs to still keep going with all of the skills that we get. And it goes back to what Mr. Fuller said. If you don't understand the system of racism, white supremacy, what it is and how it works, everything else that you do understand will only confuse you. Well, in your case and your siblings' case, that y'all really hit the mark in a real positive way with that. As far as bringing those skills and that understanding back where non-white people are at, so we can also benefit from it. And once again, thank you.
Well, I do thank you. I would say that I never, you grow up in a family and you just grow up. You don't see it as unusual or, it's just what you do. But we were very fortunate in having parents who, even though they may have had more education perhaps than some other neighbors, we were never taught to think that we were different or we were better than. Because our mother was a school teacher and our father was a physician, but we grew up in a black neighborhood, and some people, were very poor, and others were maybe not quite so poor. But we were not trained in a certain, like trained. We were trained by just what our family did. And our mother was a Chicago public school teacher for 45 years. When she retired, then she started organizing in the neighborhood, and so she would have little groups of children. She'd have them picking up the paper in the neighborhood and in the streets and stuff, and reading books and things like that. And she developed her own Keep Chicago Clean campaign, and she had buttons made, and she would go to different schools and talk to children about picking up the paper in the neighborhood and things like that. And so one of the stops where Francis talks about don't throw trash down and keep it, where black people live, grow and have their living. That's not the exact quote, but it's one of the stops. That had to come from my mother, because my mother was really keep Chicago clean, pick up the paper in front of the house, and at her funeral, at my mom's funeral, we gave out Keep Chicago Clean buttons, in remembrance of her work. So thank you for sharing, and thank you. That's very meaningful.
For sure. Roz, did you have a question for Miss Lorne Cress Love? You should be with us, Roz.
Yes, greetings to you, Gus. Greetings to you, Mrs. Cress Love. I did have a question, but I just wanted to say, again, we don't tend to tell people what they mean to us while they're here. And I just want to tell you that you are an amazing human being, your family. I want to give you my sincerest condolences on the loss of both of your sisters, and just the impact that Dr. Welsing had. I can't begin to put it into words. Actually, the first time I read that book, I originally said it was 18. It was actually 16 when my father gave me that the ISIS papers to read, and it changed my consciousness at that age so much. Back then, I used to make music. I was into hip hop and hip hop culture, and the very first solo song I made was after reading her book, and it was about racism, using the game of pool as a metaphor for racism, white supremacy. And recently, I gave my son her book. He's in college now. He's 20. He'll be 21 in the next couple of weeks. Actually, next week, to be exact. And when I gave him the book, we were talking about this. I brought up the song that I wrote, and we were talking about racism. We talk about it quite regularly. And his interest was so piqued, he asked for the book. So I gave him the book, and he was kind of worried that he was holding it for too long, because I have a pretty decent library in the house. And what I did was I actually bought myself a separate copy, and I went to him and I said, well, this is an early birthday present. I believe you need this book as soon as possible. So as a result, he now is reading the book, and it's shifting his consciousness. So I just have to say thank you so much to you and your family. May the ancestors lift you up and keep you safe and help to facilitate your health. My question to you and the other thing I wanted to say too is that I have not spent a 24-hour period. Since she's passed, there's not been a 24-hour period that has passed by where I have not had what we call a Dr. Welsing moment, where something that she said is not proven true. This is every single day of my life. So studying her is immensely important. And also what you brought up too about basically a grassroots approach to studying racism, white supremacy, whether it's in our homes or if we start smaller collectives, maybe the people who listen to the show who are a little less confused might be able to get other people who are truly interested in learning more about it to facilitate these little groups all around the country if we can do that. And I wanted to ask, what would you say would be your suggestion to try and facilitate piquing the interest of black people in studying racism? I find that we have been so conditioned to hate ourselves and to fall in line with racism, training us to not want to seek to find answers or to learn. And I just wanted to know what suggestions would you have to try and pique the interest of black people, whether it's young adults, children, or even mature adults, for that matter, but just black people in general, if you had any suggestions. Thank you so much, and may the ancestors bless and lift you up as well as the Creator.
Thank you. Thank you for your blessings. You know, I would have to say, I am not sure. I think that I almost think, I know at the school that I helped to start with some parents, I started using hidden colors. And although, you know, they're kind of long, but just having at parent groups listening to hidden colors, which may be a way of beginning to have people pique people's interest and discussion. And maybe I mean, I'm almost not certain how one begins to you can start with just a few people, one or two people who are like-minded, and maybe once a month have your own discussion groups. Maybe taking a chapter of the ISIS papers and reviewing it and discussing it, and also then how can I then apply this specific information to my life, or what aspects of this particular chapter do I see or do we see in our community? You know, begin to utilize chapter by chapter. I was reviewing today, earlier this evening, her chapter on the inferiorization, the process of black children in the process of inferiorization. And this is a very, very, very important chapter about what's happening to our children. And I think that if we begin to look at that chapter and review that whole section, and then maybe people can start some small groups with children, or going into the public schools and insisting that our children, that they have African American studies in these schools. We have to help our children, as well as helping ourselves, understand who we are, understand the miracle people that we are. We have to deeply love ourselves. I mean, we have to start some love affairs with ourselves, not with somebody else first, but first with ourselves. And that little book that I talk about, Love Yourself and Let the Other Person Have It Your Way, is really an important way of beginning to develop some practice in embracing ourselves. And I strongly recommend that book. I'm not out here selling it. I wish I was, because I've been talking about it for the last several years. But we have to develop some methodology, some things to do that work to get this heavy burden of self-hatred off of us. And you can't just talk it off. You got to work it off. Because this is the thing that's holding us down, that's forcing us to kill each other. This is the thing that breaks up our families. This is the thing that causes us to beat our children. This is the thing that causes us to not trust each other and to not be able to relate well with each other. Lack of love of self. If I don't love me, then I certainly cannot love you sitting next to me with your black self. I just can't do it. It will not work. I have to love me first so that I can then embrace you. And you can then embrace the person next to you. And we have got to get a big love affair going on with ourselves. And I'm not talking about no sex. Those of you who are listening, I know you know what I mean. This is not sex. This is love. And we really need to work on that. I mean, that's one of the major things that if we didn't do anything else but spend a year just looking at our black self in the mirror and saying, I love you. Feeling our black kinky hair and saying, I love you. Oh, this hair is so wonderful. And I do have locks, and I've had them for 10 years. And they really kind of long, and I love it. I love my hair. But love our noses. Love our big feet. Love every aspect. Love our black skin. Just embrace our blackness. If we could start doing that, we would be going a long way to healing, because we have got to heal ourselves. White people cannot heal us. We have got to heal ourselves. Thank you for your really kind comments, too, brother.
Appreciate that, Roz. This is the female caller, investor in Michigan, who spoke about wanting to transition to natural hair. She actually did dial in. Did you have a question for Miss Love? You should be with us.
May I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, Gus. Good evening to Miss Love Cress. I hope I didn't mispronounce your name. Sorry.
It's okay.
I'm sorry. I have so many notes, and I was driving when you were addressing the struggle that I'm, with the natural hair that I'm struggling with. And I was just so glad that I was able to pull over and call in. But your words were very encouraging to me because yesterday we addressed the question, and I had to, I sat down and I took an honest assessment of my thoughts. And I realized that because I tried, just like going natural, like for a whole week. And I live in Detroit, and I went, I was like, I'm just going to try it for 1 week and see how I feel. And I felt so uncomfortable. My experience was just totally different. And I realized that I was looking for validation just from people, from just someone to validate that it looked nice or that it's pretty or whatever. And because I didn't get that validation, or I got, like, even my grandmother, she was like, "Oh, you better go get your hair done." She was so, like, she just chopped me down.
I know.
When I walked into her house. And even my youngest son, he's 9 years old. He's brutally honest. He was like, "Ooh," they were just kind of shocked, And so that just stuck in my mind. I noticed I paid more attention to the negative comments that I received. So what I'm going to do, I really appreciate you sharing that book. I've already ordered it tonight, And I'm going to protect my mind, because what I realize is that these images that are programming us to this detrimental standard of beauty that the white people are giving us, I realize that, like Dr. Welsing will always say, reading is more important than watching TV. If the more I read, I'm creating images in my own mind. So I'm reading, and all my books are black focused, so to speak. You know, it's about racism. It's about, you know, black people. So I'm just learning now to appreciate just the protecting of my mind and what I allow to go inside my mind. It's a journey. I'm going to be definitely patient with myself. And like I said, your words definitely encourage me, because I realize this, you know, it's just something I'm telling myself. When I looked in the mirror, I'm like, okay, you were just saying just a few minutes ago, you got to tell yourself you're beautiful. You got to tell yourself that your hair is beautiful. You got to speak these words, be and it is. And so I'm going to definitely just incorporate that. I work with young people, and I realize how much of an influence I have. I work with black students. I have a mentoring program, and I know that they are watching my every move. And I have such an influence on them. But because I'm less confused, or I'm striving to become less confused about racism, like I shared last night, I hate having weave in my hair. I hate not being able to just embrace my own beauty. So this is something that I'm passionate about now. And again, I thank you for coming on the program and just addressing this and being authentic and sharing your journey, because it means a lot. It's helping me more than you know.
Well, thank you. And don't give up on yourself, you know. I don't know how much time we have. But when it took me 7 years to stop straightening my hair, but that was back in the 50s and nobody else was doing it. But I went through the same things that you're going through, you know. So it wasn't like, you know, don't think that it wasn't easy. And I went through the same people. What are you doing to your hair? You know, all that stuff. You know, yeah, right. What's wrong with your hair? You know, and myself, between the three of us, myself and my two sisters, I was the first to stop straightening my hair. And so, you know, my mother, Lorne, you know, but fortunately, when I stopped, it was in 1964, and I was going to go to Mississippi to work in the civil rights movement. So even though I had decided that I could stop straightening my hair in Chicago, I said, no, I'm going to wait till I get to Mississippi, because, you know, I won't have to go through all this stuff with my friends and stuff. So I went through that. I know it. So, you know, you can do it. You can do it. And just start embracing yourself, you know, and giving yourself approval, giving your hair approval. You know, that's what we need to do. We got to love ourselves. And it's not easy, because we live in a society that has taught us to not love ourselves, and for 400 years. So we got to work. You know, it's work, but it's well worth it. You know, you know, it'll be hard. Nothing really worth it is easy, but you will get there. You will get there. And thank you for your courage. Thank you for your courage.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Just would emphasize, I know Dr. Welsing would as well, that minimizing that television probably would be extremely important in that process, because that's just white supremacy programming every time, which you already touched on, and just constant degradation of black people overtly and covertly. It's going to be a lot of the contrast programming, where they're going to have images of beauty. It's going to be a white person, then having black people looking crazy, and just everything else. I would really be try to minimize the TV as much as possible throughout that whole process. We had one more person that dialed in with a hand up. I wanted to get their question as well, but just because I think that's so important with so many aspects of trying to deal with racism. We are all victims. We've all been subjected to the same abuse, spiritually, mentally, emotionally. Being around other black people who are also victims and where they don't validate you, whether it's you just want to share your views on racism, your observations on racism, and they're just, oh my God, you're talking great. Dr. Welsing used to talk about that all the time, where people would hear her and be like, oh, you are crazy. This is the craziest lady I've ever heard in the world.
That's right.
Everything that she's talking
That's
about.
That's right.
And it's the same.
I mean, it's only within the last maybe it's 10 years that people have begun to really, large numbers of people have begun to, and people would say to her, I thought you were crazy. When I first heard you talk, I thought you were crazy. Or when I first got that book, I thought you were crazy. People did. What she had to go through. And even up to, maybe I don't know whether I said this on the last program, but even with the National Medical Association, the last convention that they had in August of 2015, previously Francis had always done a workshop that was very, very well attended. But the 2015 NMA convention, they did not give her a workshop site. And I think she never talked about that really hurting her, but I know it hurt her. And I'm still pissed. I'm just pissed with those people. The nerve of them. But, the drug companies and whoever support and give money, and the lack of courage of the National Medical Association to have ignored her in 2015, they ought to be ashamed of themselves.
Context of white supremacy. And just in context, Dr. Welsing endured a lot of that sort of thing in terms of not just, black people seeing her book or what have you, or hearing her on television or on Donahue or something saying, oh, she's crazy, talking about this racism. But in terms of her professional career, I know she talked about on this program repeatedly being denied tenure at Howard University, which is a historically black university, so I've been told, being denied tenure. And even she came back on the program and said that she later got information that the federal government was involved in blocking her getting tenure because of her work on racism. Just talking about incredible sacrifices that she made to do, and at the core of it, to help black people. That was what all this was about, to help black people in what she was doing to deal with racism. She endured a lot to do this work and remain steadfast. I'm sorry, were you going to comment?
Well, I was going to say that Francis was, as far as I know, practically fired from every subsequent job that she held with the government, and never had won a case. You would be surprised at the number of so-called black lawyers who were bought off in one way or another, who had been hired to defend her around a job issue or job-related issues. Yes. She endured much more than even she talked about. You know what I'm saying? In other words, she was not a person who was a complainer or, a person who would say poor me at all. But she endured a lot. And the rejection by Howard early on took its toll much more than she even understood. I will say that. I would say that. You know, yes. Because when you know, I mean, she was told, you know, well, what makes you think that you can, when she did her first paper, the Cress theory, well, you can't name a theory after yourself, you know? I mean, you know, men, well, you know, you can't, you know, kind of like the nerve of you thinking that you can do something and call it the Cress theory. You know, that rejection. We take these things in, even though we may not complain about it. We take these things in, and I know that every black person in America, in all probability, has had an experience of being rejected in some kind of way related to race. You know, you suck it up, you know, whether it's going into a restaurant, even today, and sat in a certain place. Just Easter, some friends of mine and my sisters took me to dinner on Easter Sunday, and to this, you know, kind of fancy restaurant, and we were sat near the kitchen, and I didn't think about it at the time, but then I realized that all the other black people were being set over in this kind of dark area in this restaurant, and I didn't really think about it until we were leaving, and I saw all these white people in an area by the windows and stuff, and I said, "Oh my God, you know, oh my God." We were actually segregated, you know, this right here in Bethesda, Maryland. So we take right now. I mean, you know, when I have to take a cab, you know, I'm not going to stop on the street and hail a cab because he's going to, you know, I feel like I will not be picked up. We carry these things internally, whether we recognize them or not, and the effect on us is what is called disease, dis-ease. Much of our illness, much of the problems that we have medically as African Americans, high blood pressure, et cetera, is related in one way or another to racism, white supremacy. Jobs that we can't get, how we're treated on jobs, et cetera, we suck it up, but it affects us. And, I mean, these rejections, and they stop us from pushing forward and maximizing our potential.
Ashe, absolutely. John Henryism. I just kept thinking that over in my head, that concept got brought forward on this program many times over the years in terms of the health consequences, how racism literally causes disease within black people, and the stress and just the accumulation of all the rejections and the strain and trauma of white supremacy. Before I get the last person that called in, just also, I think the first time when we spoke, and this is no disrespect at all, I'm just, you know, I thought it was relevant just for the caller that dialed in when she was talking about what people were saying about her hair, and even, I think she said one of her children, you know, kind of looked at her hair like, oh, that's incorrect. What's wrong with your hair? Where you said that when you transitioned and you went natural with your hair, that you did your work with SNCC, obviously. I've talked about on the program before that I took a class. I studied under Julian Bond while I was in school, and he did marry a white woman, unfortunately, where you said later on.
Yes, interesting, huh?
that you bumped into him, and did he make a comment about your hair?
Yeah, he did. You know, he said, I liked your hair better the other way or something like that. Yeah. Is that what I said he said?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, well, that's what he said, you know. I mean, you know, really, wow. Yeah. So, just because you're acknowledged as a great civil rights leader does not necessarily mean that your whole head is all totally together. It's hard to do that in America. It's hard. It's hard. It's very difficult to really be black in America, and to love your black self. That takes work. That really takes work. And let me just say this, because this is one of the things that I've been thinking about for some time. Maybe I said it before, but I don't know. We need to start teaching African American studies in Head Start. Not at college, but in Head Start. That's when the stuff needs to be started. And that's where parents can begin to tell their little children, no matter their little black children, how beautiful they are. Just how beautiful, how much we love them, how much you love them. And in these nursery schools, that's where black studies needs to start. Not at the college level, in Head Start, in the nursery schools. Those are the people who are beginning to have the first influences outside the family on the children. And these nursery schools need to get their acts together and start telling our children what marvelous little African American people they're going to be. They are already, and that they're growing into. But that's where the black studies really needs to be. That's where so it goes all the way through. Not wait until you get to high school or college. It's almost too late by then.
Absolutely. In fact, the black female, she just published a book talking about they were doing exactly that in Mississippi, no less, where you had been doing your activist work, that's what they were doing in Mississippi with the Head Start program in the 1960s, early 70s. And, of course, white supremacists were furious, and they went about the business of trying to totally destroy the Head Start program in Mississippi for that very reason, that they were talking explicitly about black love, black self-respect, black history, all of that, and whites immediately said, not going to have this at all. We got to find any reason, any excuse to get rid of this program, like immediately. That's the subject of the book she just published. Again, Dr. Welsing would say reading is more important than watching television.
I was literally at the meeting in 1965, I think it was, in Greenwood, Mississippi, when Head Start, the concept of Head Start, was first introduced. And a number of people who were involved with SNCC and the Mississippi Summer Project that then became, went on to COFA program, helped to design that early program, yes, which would have been very successful. But in spite of that, that Mississippi has the largest number of black elected officials of any state in the nation, and that certainly is a result of the work of the civil rights movement, SNCC, and other organizations in Mississippi in the 60s and into the 70s. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I know Chokwe Lumumba, many others carried on that legacy, and exactly what you all were doing in the 1960s that made all of that possible.
Yes.
Our caller in South Florida, did you have a question for Miss Lorne Cress Love? You should be with us. Caller 1078, are you listening, or did you have a question, or are you just listening? It sounds like your line should be open. If you're just listening, if you could let us know, that would be grand. If not, I'll assume you didn't have a comment or what have you.
Hello, can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. Hey, good evening to everybody. This is Devin in Miami. I had a question I wanted to ask you, Mrs. Love. Greetings to you. I'm glad to have you on the show.
Thank you.
All right. Now, You're very welcome. A friend of mine I hadn't been in contact with in years. I actually found out his daughter had written a book. Now, two things. The book that was written, she's a young black girl, young non-white girl, and the cover of her book had no representation of herself, but just the picture of her. And the pictures that she drew were of her opposites. That's number one. And secondly, the school, from what my friend told me, basically just stole the rights to the book. They went ahead and published the book, and the little girl, his daughter, the 9-year-old, wasn't getting a penny from the proceeds of the sale. So he had to definitely go and make some legal action to where the book was republished, and now the young lady is being compensated for her work. But what did you think about that, and what is a good strategy you think I could share with my friend to try to give his daughter the proper insight about herself and where she comes from?
Well, I'm not. It's not clear. I'm not really clear on what. I'm not clear on what you're sharing. I mean,
okay.
Yeah. Can you be a little more definitive?
Yes. A 9-year-old girl had produced a book, and the book that she produced, or the pictures that she drew on the cover of the book, was basically of only white children.
Okay.
The school that she goes to, when she wrote the book in school, the school basically published the book for her, and she wasn't receiving any proceeds from that at all. I just wanted to know what you thought about that, and how could I advise my friend to give his daughter some better insight about herself and where she comes from.
Well, what is it about the daughter? Is she African American?
Yes.
Okay. And the cover of the book were white children?
Correct.
Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
And okay. So are you asking, how can this African American child develop a stronger self-concept of herself as African American?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay. Well, I think that, how old is this child? How old is she?
She's 9.
9? Well, I would say that, what kind of school? Is she a minority in a predominantly white school?
Actually, my friend informed me that her mother is of Asian descent, and she is in a school where she is the only black child in the school, her and her sibling.
And is the father with the family? Is the father African American?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, and he's with the family?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I am not Dr. Welsing. That's the first thing I would have to let you know, and her insights and knowledge are far superior to mine. But what I would say is that children who are in mixed marriages, if the partner who is not African American, if is kind of in charge of the enculturation, then the child is not going to be developing a very strong sense of her African Asian self. I wouldn't say most, but often mixed marriages, people come together, but they really do not talk about race very much. They're not honest with each other, and the children are affected because there's not a true understanding of how are we going to raise this child to understand who she or he is. Now, I don't know what the child looks like, so it's hard to discern. But also...
She's your complexion.
She's what?
She's your complexion.
You know my complexion?
Yes.
How do you know my complexion?
I thought I saw a picture of you.
Oh, okay. Well, okay. Well, it then becomes, and the father is your friend, right?
Yes, and we're both very dark.
And he's very dark?
Yeah, both of us, yeah.
Oh, both, okay, you and your... Okay, then the father has to step forward and help his wife to understand that our child is a child of color and has to feel good about herself, and they will have to reinforce that in terms of education, buying books, et cetera, because a child of color in a predominantly white school has great difficulty. And if they're not getting support from home in terms of who, you're beautiful the way you are, your hair is beautiful, your beingness is beautiful, then they're really, really suffering. Interestingly, my nephew, who his father was the first black astronaut, actually, well, he was the second, Robert Lawrence, but grew up on Air Force, well, not grew because his dad died when he was 6 or 7, but was in a number of predominantly white schools. And he only recently, and he's now 55 years old, he's just recently telling me of his experience as a small child in predominantly white situations where he knew that the children did not like him. He knew that, but he did not know how to express it to his parents. And so little children are having these experiences, but they don't know how to express them, and therefore the parents don't know what they're going through. But any child of color in a predominantly white situation is a child that's in danger. Now, that's just true. I say that. And if they're not helped, they will end up seeing, because everybody in the school, in the class who is white are important. And so the child sees those people as they get older, as puberty turns on, they're the queens and kings of the prom, they're the this, they're the that, and the child of color wants to be like them, and often will end up marrying out of race. But then, of course, your friend the father has. What is that saying? I mean, I'm just commenting. But they need to embrace their child of color and help the little girl to see the beauty in herself, because now she just sees beauty in white people. That reminds me of the doll test, where the children are asked to look at dolls, black children, and who is this pretty doll? They point to the white one. Who is the smart one? Point to the white one. Who is all the positives? And who is the dumb one? They point to the black one. That whole thing that Kenneth Clark did, now it's more than 50 years ago, about 60 years ago, it still holds true today, right up to this moment. Does that help in any way?
Absolutely. I really wanted to ask that question. I think my friend is actually, this is his first time listening to the show. So I just wanted to ask that question for him.
Oh, okay. Well,
Thanks a
You're
lot.
a good friend.
And, blessings. I try.
Yeah, you're a good friend. Mm-hmm.
Appreciate that. Caller in Florida. I think we nabbed all the callers. We didn't want to. Oh, I think we. Her name was mentioned. I guess I'll shout out Sabrina Johnson. If she's listening live, good to see you again. I didn't want to put her on the spot if she wanted to ask a question or make a comment.
Well, Sabrina Johnson could make a comment because she was one of Dr. Welsing's true students and supporters, and knows more about the Cress theory and the ISIS papers than I do.
For sure. We were fortunate to have her on the program a few weeks back. I think one of our callers mentioned it before. I will just check in. Always good to, she said not to call her Miss Johnson. Sabrina, good to see you. I hope you're doing well. Did you have any commentary you want to add in with Miss Lorne Cress Love joining us this evening?
Well, peaceful greetings, everyone. I'm actually just now, literally, calling in. I had another call, so I didn't hear the previous comment, but as always, want to share appreciation for what you're doing, Gus. Mama Lorne, you continue to be a tremendous powerhouse and inspiration to so many in so many avenues. So keep going, and we very interesting times now. Every day in the news, we see things that make us get, I think, more and more clear about what's going on, and hopefully expand and strengthen our resolve to replace the system of white supremacy with a system of justice.
Earlier, Sabrina, a caller, asked about the continuation of the Institute and what was going to happen, and I shared that we had between July, August, and at least July and August to kind of see what steps we would be taking as far as continuing, Dr. Welsing's messages. But certainly you and other members of the Institute have, since January, done a yeoman job of continuing, presenting the thought and theory of Francis. And you are to be commended.
Well, thank you. And we plan to continue. There's a lot of enthusiasm to go forward, and the system has not ended, slowed down, or deviated. So we have to keep up the same pace.
For listeners who, I guess, might want to keep up, if they want more details, or certainly if they're people that are in the D.C., Maryland, Virginia area, where if there's anything that they can do to help assist in the effort, what would be the best way for them to, I guess, keep in touch, get information, or maybe even contact you or some of the other folks that are spearheading the effort to continue the Institute?
Okay, we will post information, contact information, or any update information about the Institute and its meeting logistics on the memorial page for Dr. Welsing, the Facebook memorial page, if and when there are any changes and updates.
Okay. And how would, what should folks search? I guess, what's the name of the Facebook page, just so folks can know how to track it down?
I believe if you just do Francis Cress Welsing Memorial page, Memorial, Francis Cress Welsing Memorial, in the Facebook search field, I think that should direct you.
Okay. Grant. I will post it on my Facebook page and tweet it out. If you get confused, if you're looking for information and you can't find it, you can feel free to drop me an email and I can pass it along. But it didn't take me more than 10 seconds and I was able to find it. So if you can't find it, Francis Cress Welsing memorial page, if you can't find it, just drop me an email. We'll pass it along. And if you get lost or if you want to ask questions to any of the folks that are trying to help organize the effort, drop me an email and I will forward it on to Ms. Johnson so that you can get clarification. With that, always grand to hear from Ms. Johnson. As I said, she was in the archives. We had her on just a few weeks back this year to give some of her thoughts on Dr. Welsing, what she's learned, and just views in general on the system of white supremacy. Hopefully we can have her back on as well, give us an update on what's happening and to get some of her thoughts on what has transpired over 2016 since we spoke with her last. I didn't want to take... Ms. Love, I didn't want to take up your entire evening. It's been just phenomenal to hear from you again. Folks are really hoping that we could kind of stay in touch with you to just keep Dr. Welsing's spirit with us and to hear your insight on things that we can and should be doing to try to solve this problem. Any final comment you want to leave folks with before we let you go for the rest of the evening?
Well, first of all, I really do want to thank you for just giving me an opportunity to share some of my thoughts. But more than that, I wanted to encourage you to keep up your good work. It is so important that we have these vehicles, if I can use that word, for sharing other kinds of information. And the work that it takes to do this, I know is not easy. So I want to, just encourage you and thank you, not just for sharing, about Francis Welsing, but sharing the voices that need to be heard by all of us, and to encourage people to read. I mean, we really do have to turn off the television and even the cell phones, and read some of these books, unless you're doing a book on the phone or something like that. But we've got to do more reading and thinking. And I have been caught by a television. I haven't had a television in ages. And since I have been here in Washington in my sister's home, I found a little bitty television and somebody gave me an antenna. And I have been caught and trapped by this monster. And so I just, I understand what it can do to you. So you have to really get courage and strength to put it down, turn it off, and go get the ISIS papers and read a chapter and figure out how can I use this chapter, or how can I use this particular wisdom in my day-to-day effort with my family, my friends, and my community, because that's the work that we all must begin doing. How can I really encourage people to take the ISIS papers and read chapter 20 on black children and the process of inferiorization, which she wrote in 1974. And it is even more exaggerated now in terms of our condition. So that would be my final that exhortation, if you would. But I thank you for the opportunity, and thank you so much for continuing to hold Francis's name up, and blessings to everyone. Blessings to everyone. Ashe.
Ashe. Ashe. Just echoing what many of the listeners, callers have shared this evening. Just thank you. You've just been a brilliant illustration of Black self-respect. I definitely pray that you continue to take care of yourself. I know it's just been an extremely difficult few months, but just as much self-care and replenishing as possible so that you can maintain and stay strong to continue to do this work. It's always just been a tremendous honor to hear your views on racism, white supremacy, and memories with regards to Dr. Welsing and your other sister as well, Barbara Cress Lawrence. But we will certainly look forward to being able to staying in touch, having you back on the program, and just hope that you continue doing your outstanding work also. We will be checking the page and looking to do anything we can to help with the projects that are going on. And just again, thank you for sharing some of your Thursday evening with us. Our guest once again, third time this year, Miss Lorne Cress Love. Thank you so much, and we will speak with you soon.
Thank you.
For sure. Good evening. Context of White Supremacy. Third time having her on the program. Real treat. It's being able to just get, as I said, more of just information about the life and times of Dr. Frances Cress Welsing and her individual views. She, has invested a huge amount of her life in this exact same problem with regards to dealing with racism, white supremacy. Just real pleasure to speak with her. And she as well reminds me of Dr. Welsing. Seems like she always has a book or three to recommend that we check out to get more information about racism, white supremacy. I certainly appreciate her commentary at the end about the power of television. That's why I recommended our female investor up in Michigan who was talking about transitioning to having natural hair and the difficulty in that process. About the only recommendation I would make, really try to minimize and get away from the TV, because is such a powerful weapon in the system of white supremacy. I just don't think that can be understated with the images that you're being bombarded with, the concepts, what is being presented as beautiful, the imaging of the projections that you get of Black people on television just so consistently are negative and degrading. Even if they should happen to throw in a Black person, if it's a Black female and they have natural hair, they got to do something where it either be she'll be acting crazy, or she'll be married to a white person, or it'll just be something where it's just not going to be a beautiful Black person who is intelligent, smart, behaving well. Like, wow, this is, person I would want to be like, or this is a person I would want to marry. It's just not going to be that. Same thing for Black males. They'll be with a white woman or acting crazy or selling drugs, or, it's just standard operating procedure. Just really try to minimize. I would say if you can turn it off completely, that would be best. But it is so powerful. A lot of times the damage from sitting in front of that television, I don't think we recognize how much it influences our thought, speech, and behavior with that TV. I can even speak from a personal experience. Man, not that long ago, it's basketball season right now. Oh, man, it's not even just basketball season. It's playoff season. Not that long ago, that ancient history. Man, if you had told me, okay, Gus, you're going to be doing a program on racism, and you are going to do it at the same time that playoff basketball is on. Like, no way. I don't care who we're supposed to talk to. I don't care what the subject is. We need to move this time to either make it earlier in the day, later in the day, do this so that I can sit in front of a television and still see the game, maybe with the sound down. Like, it would have been totally, I could not have fathomed the concept, the idea, even the notion, the suggestion that we're going to do something concurrently with an NBA playoff game where you will not be able to watch the game, and that I would have been cool with that. Like, that is the level of addiction that I had around television and basketball specifically. And just, again, a lot of this just comes down to time and energy, too. Like, if we are in a system of racism, white supremacy as Black people, there are certainly an astronomical amount of things that we can and should be doing, as opposed to chilling in front of our 50-foot television to watch Empire or Scandal or basketball or whatever else is being broadcast today. There have to be many other things that we could be doing, pulling out some of those stops, getting Dr. Welsing's book and say, I'm going to read a chapter, anything that would be a much better investment of our time and energy. The book, on cue, since you're not going to be watching television, if you need something to do with your time, the book, when you heard Miss Lorne Cress Love when she was talking about Mississippi and the Head Start program and her activity with that in the 1960s, the book that I was referencing that just came out, where a gorgeous black female published, her name is, should I give up? Crystal Sanders. Crystal Sanders, that is her name, and the book is titled A Chance for Change, Head Start and Mississippi's Black Freedom Struggle. It just came out this year. Matter of fact, it just came out this month, no less. But it gives that information, and I played the snippet where she was talking about her book. She said that verbatim when black people in Mississippi, when they started doing their Head Start program and doing exactly what Miss Cress Love mentioned, giving those black children, boys and girls, constructive information about racism, about black history, affirmation so that they could build, nourish black self-respect, white supremacists in Mississippi went on attack to say we have got to trash this program immediately. There is no way we are going to sponsor any sort of program that is giving this sort of constructive information to black children, and they went on attack immediately. But that's exactly what the book is about. Again, A Chance for Change, Head Start, and Mississippi's Black Freedom Struggle. Just came out this year. And again, the author, Crystal Sanders, black female. Speaking of books, if anyone would like to invest, one of the easy ways that you can contribute to the cows, if you go to Amazon.com, you can search for Gus T Renegade. You'll see my wish list. We have a white woman that should be coming on the program next Wednesday, a week from yesterday. If you remember when we had Dr. Tommy Curry on the program last week, I asked him for a book because he always is very good for keeping up with literature and what have you. He recommended Melissa Stein. She's a white woman, suspected racist, and she wrote a book. It's called Measuring Manhood, where he said that it does a really good job of showing in the system of white supremacy the degradation of black masculinity, and also highlighting white women's role in the process of maintaining white supremacy, how that has evolved over time. And this is a white woman who wrote this book, but he said he thought it was great, gave a lot of information, and it supported some of the concepts, things that he was talking about when he visited with us last. Particularly, I think he focused a lot during that program, and specifically some of the ways that white women have maintained, participated in the system of white supremacy. But she should be on the program next week. I need to read the book, so if folks want to help out, it's on my wish list, should be at the top of my wish list if folks want to nab the Kindle copy specifically. I need the Kindle version of this because this is going to be a quick turnaround, so I kind of need to get this in hand immediately so that I can start reading and be prepared. Always love being able to ask questions. We get a white person on the program. Looking forward to that for next week. The only other thing I wanted to say before we get ready to close things out, I had read in the news about Ken Thompson. Ken Thompson is a black prosecuting attorney in New York City specifically. He is the attorney who did get the conviction against against Peter Liang, the non-white enforcement officer. He's now fired, former NYPD officer who shot and killed Akai Gurley at the end of 2014. Ken Thompson, he did get the conviction. He's a black male. He did get the conviction, but he recommended that Peter Liang serve no jail time. And a lot of people were upset about this and, saying he needs to be fired, that, he's just a pawn for the system of racism in so many words. And I wanted to comment because there was a black female professor at John Jay College in New York, Dolores Jones Brown. She was doing an interview where they were talking about this whole situation with the Akai Gurley killing and the sentencing of Peter Liang. Should he do jail time? Should he not? The dynamics of racism, white supremacy, specifically because Peter Liang is not white. And what that means and how all of this is processed. But she addressed this and she said, for the people that are upset about what happened, Ken Thompson at least got a conviction in this case. Most of the time when these shootings go down, there's not even, much less a conviction. Most of the time, you don't even get a trial. Eric Garner's family didn't even get a trial Michael Brown's family didn't even get a trial. Tamir Rice's family didn't even get a trial. I mean, we could do this for a long time where it doesn't even get to this point, much less a conviction. That was the first thing that she said. And she said that she didn't say the dynamics of racism, white supremacy, but she was pretty much, I'm kind of paraphrasing, that was pretty much what she was saying, that it's not like you could just go in and say, this is what's going to be, and this is how things are going to go down. He's going to do this amount of jail time, what have you. There are greater forces at play than what Ken Thompson, black male, can do in a system of white supremacy when you're dealing with these types of cases. But she, in my view, gave very logical pushback to people who wanted to get upset and jump up and down about what Ken Thomas has or has not done, what he should have done in this case with Peter Liang, Akai Gurley. This, for me, was corroborated because I was reading the New York Times, and the sound clip that I played at the beginning of the program, it talked, Dr. Welsing, she was saying that she spends her money buying newspapers, trying to get more information about racism, white supremacy, what it is, how it works. There was an article, and it was talking about, I guess they have a program at the University of Michigan where they were looking at false convictions. And they determined that there was a high number of false convictions. They were looking specifically at Texas and New York. Those were the two states that they examined. And it was tons of these false convictions where people were being convicted of crimes where they actually had not committed a crime. People were being convicted of crimes with, very shaky evidence, where it seems like there was certainly enough reasonable doubt that these folks probably shouldn't have been convicted. And some of these people, they had people who had spent 30 years in jail where they went back and reviewed the case and determined that there was no evidence that a crime even happened, or if there was a witness who testified that the witness's testimony was not credible, just all sorts of things. But there were a lot of these cases, and no surprise, most of the people who were wrongly convicted were black. Ken Thompson, same person, was a key figure in New York in making this happen and really championing this and saying, we need to go back and review a lot of these cases. I think we have a lot of people who have been locked up, convicted, where they did not commit a crime. And they mentioned his name over and over and saying that he's someone who has really been at the forefront of pushing this. And as I said, this I won't say it's a lot on the basis of the number of black people who get locked up incorrectly on a regular basis, but it was well over 100 people just this year that had been released from prison. This is just New York and Texas, and they were talking about trying to spread this program on a wide-scale basis. But I thought that was really important, just not that I'm jumping up and down to say that, Ken Thomas is the best person in the world and that sort of thing. I'm not saying that at all, but just I think a lot of times it can be very easy to criticize and fault-find other victims of racism. We are all in a very weak position under the system of racism, white supremacy. And I think some of us try to do the best that we can. I think many of us, I'd be willing to say that, many of us in a very weak position try to do the best that we can under extremely difficult situations. And I think Ken Thomas, I'd say it looks like he might be trying to do the best that he can under difficult conditions. Certainly, I probably would say I wouldn't agree with everything, and people can get upset and argue and wrangle back and forth, but it does look like he has done, try to do the best that he can, try to help out black people to the degree that he can from a very difficult, very weak spot. And I'm sure he has faced criticism, exactly what we heard about Dr. Welsing, the opposition that she faced at Howard University. I am sure Ken Thompson has heard it about both how he has handled the Peter Liang case from both non-white people and white people, as well as his efforts to go back and review these cases. I cannot imagine that being something particularly that powerful individuals classified as white would be pleased about, seeing some black prosecuting attorney going back and reviewing cases and saying, we're going to let some of these black people out of jail because they got locked up incorrectly. I cannot imagine that being something that white people would rejoice about in New York or anywhere else under the system of white supremacy. But that was just something I thought was important. I will make sure that I get the article. Matter of fact, it's not just the article, it's multiple articles. That was the reason that I wanted to say something about this in the first place, because I'd seen multiple reports where he was at the center of this, black people being wrongly convicted, where he was the one leading the charge. One of the reports, this is in the New York Times, this came out just a couple weeks ago. The title is Man wrongfully convicted of murder, awaits his exoneration 52 years later. That's one of the reports dealing with this. And then they had a more recent report also at the New York Times. I'll link both of them on my Facebook page, but they had a more recent report that was dealing with the same thing, where it was the University of Michigan, their law program, kind of reviewed some of these cases in New York and Texas and found, again, not surprisingly, that a lot of black people get locked up where they actually did not do anything at all, or certainly there was no evidence that they should have been convicted of doing anything. They should not have been in jail. Check that out. Thought that was significant. With that, we should be here tomorrow. Medical apartheid. Again, reading is more important than watching television. Medical apartheid, study session number 5, Harriet A. Washington's phenomenal text on racism, white supremacy. I have thoroughly enjoyed it. We've had fantastic participation from listeners the whole time. I assume that means that people are enjoying the book, even though it is not exactly pleasant reading. I mean, it is pretty macabre hearing about the different things that have happened, are still happening to black people under the guise of science and research. It is certainly unpleasant reading, but I think it should be required. Any black person that's serious about addressing racism, white supremacy, you should read this book. And read this book with extreme attention to detail. Get your highlighter out. Take notes, check the footnotes, reference materials, extremely important reading, and looking forward. It'll be tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Tune in. If you missed any of the archives, the content should be available online if you want to go back and study up, be prepared, ready to roll for tomorrow afternoon. We'll be here Saturday, of course, compensatory call-in, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. We'll review news, observations last 7 days, as well as workplace racism. Folks have suggestions, problems, codification for how to minimize problems on the job with suspected racists and or other victims of racism, non-white people. Tune in this Saturday. Looking forward to hearing from everyone. With that, we will wrap things up. Always grand to have Lorne Cress Love with us on the program. Again, we'll hope to have her back with us again soon. Thanks again, Sabrina Johnson. Always good to hear from her. Hopefully we'll have her on the program again as well to get an update both on what's happening with the Cress Welsing Institute as well as her observations and views of what has been taking place 2016. Certainly the political process. Again, Dr. Welsing, her prophetic prediction that Donald Trump was going to take the White House this November, she is looking pretty good. We still have a considerable amount of time to go, but as of May, she is looking pretty good, and looking pretty good when most people did not think this was possible at all. We will wrap there. As I say consistently, sobriety would be best under conditions of white terrorism. Given that war is being waged against us worldwide 24/7, we want to make sure that we are lucid, clear thinking so that we can make the best possible decisions to keep ourselves as safe as possible, as well as anybody that we might be responsible for. If you're going to be out in a vehicle, that's whether you're the driver, passenger, pedestrian, you do not want to be intoxicated. That is just making the job of Darren Wilson, Daniel Holtzclaw, Daniel Pantaleo, you're just making their job 1,000 times easier for whatever they want to do. If that's arrest you, maul you, choke, tase, take your life, you're just making it way easier if you're under the influence. Let's do everything we can to minimize contact with potential race soldiers. That includes buckling up. Even some of the easy things that we can do to minimize contact, let's do that as well. With that, Creator, we ask that you help us remain patient with other black people, victims of white supremacy. We ask that you help us remain patient with ourselves. Remind us to demonstrate the highest levels of black self-respect at all times, in all places, each and every time we are in contact with another black person. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Cal signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed. I'm a victim, brother. Problem. You're a victim. I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning. Shut up. The man has programmed my conditioning. Mm-hmm. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.